Hi, I'm Dr. Wilson. I'm a PhD molecular biologist, and welcome to another COVID debunking video. This week I'm covering Jimmy Dore, a comedian turned anti-vaccine comedian, who has a very large following on YouTube where he talks about COVID vaccines, and boy does he get a lot wrong. At this point, it's undeniable that COVID vaccines are incredibly beneficial, but that doesn't stop some people like Jimmy Dore from saying otherwise. So, what is he saying, and where do you go to find out whether or not he is right? That's what I'll be discussing in this video. So, let's get started by listening to what Jimmy Dore has to say, and then I'll respond promptly.
The Washington Post reports on April 29th that a growing percentage of Americans dying from COVID-19 are vaccinated. New data underscores that age, even with vaccination, is the massive risk factor for COVID death.
Yeah, among the people who have received 2 or 3 doses of COVID vaccine, relatively very few people have actually died of COVID. And among those who have died of COVID and gotten vaccinated, they have mostly been very, very old. This is important to recognize so that those people can have good access to things like Paxlovid or Evusheld or other things that could help them prevent infection or treat them if they do get infected. This increase in deaths among the vaccinated that this Washington Post article is, in my opinion, inadequately reporting on is because there was a big surge in Omicron numbers. And with a big surge in Omicron numbers, you'd have more infections and overall more deaths in every category.
While many worried the pandemic's toll would shift toward younger people, the opposite actually occurred as the Delta variant subsided and the Omicron surged. So they were afraid that when we got new variants that would go after younger people, but didn't. It actually went after even older people.
That's not quite true, actually. The Omicron wave was the deadliest COVID wave yet for children and younger people. So that might be important to include in a video talking about this stuff, right, Jimmy? Think about it.
So here's this chart. Unvaccinated still die at a much higher rate. The share of deaths among vaccinated people has risen, but the rate of death is still many times higher among unvaccinated people. In January and February, unvaccinated people died at about 7 times the rate of fully vaccinated and 20 times the rate. I don't like when they use that 20 and 10 times. That's a deceitful number. When they tell you that instead, why don't they give me the raw data? What percentage of people died?
Jimmy, Jimbo, Jimothy, you seem confused. Here, read the graph and you'll see that it is a rate per 100,000. It is not a percent, but you could get a percent from that if you really wanted to calculate it. The fact that this is a rate per 100,000 people literally means that unvaccinated people did die at 20 times the rate of vaccinated people when it comes to COVID. This is literally as simple as reading the graph in front of you. I don't know why this is a hard ask from someone with a large audience talking about this stuff who claims to know what he's talking about. Man.
Is that what it says down there by your arm? It's like 0.2%, 0.4, 3.4. Is that what that means, those numbers?
So yeah, so 0.04% to 0.34%. That's right. So the fully vaccinated died at 0.4%, and the unvaccinated, according to this, were 3.4%. So that's an increase of about 3%.
No, Jimmy, this is a rate per 100,000 people graph. This is not a percent graph. The figures that you're pointing to show that at the tail end of the Omicron wave, unvaccinated people were dying at 8.5 times the rate of vaccinated people. And at the peak of the Omicron wave, it was 20 times more death for unvaccinated relative to vaccinated. And if you look at the line for 3 doses, it's even better than for 2 doses, which is consistent with every other data set that we have.
But they like to say 20 times. They like to do it that way. It's a 3% increase in death. 20 times. It sounds unbelievable. It sounds like 20,000% when they say 20 times, doesn't it?
No, it sounds like 20 times, which is 2,000%, which is accurate if you read the graph properly. Yeesh.
I would like to know, again, trying to get the actual death rate for COVID is impossible as far as I can find. We've looked at this before and we can't find it.
Really, Jimmy? How hard have you tried? Because if you go to Google and you type in COVID death count US, the first few links that come up will give you an accurate death count. If you type in COVID death count CDC, then you can get even further breakdown on those deaths. And in one of those links, you can even see the rate of hospitalization, cases, or deaths among unvaccinated versus vaccinated versus 2-3 doses, whatever. You can find all that information really easily if you just try a little bit. And just so you know, I'll have all those links in the description of this video so that you can check them out freely for yourself.
So are these people who died of COVID or with COVID? I don't know.
They are people who died of COVID. These numbers reflect those who died with COVID-19 as a cause or underlying cause on their death certificate. If you disagree with those who fill out the death certificate and determine the cause of death, then you can take it up with the hundreds of thousands of doctors and healthcare workers all around the US who do this on a daily basis. If you ever hear someone ask this with versus from COVID question on a big platform, then that is a huge red flag and shows that they have not done their due diligence to do the basic amount of research on this topic.
But what I get from this when I read it is that this is something that's affecting old people. And that the greatest risk for COVID death is your age.
Yes, people who are aged 50 years or older are at the most risk of dying from COVID. That does not mean that there is no risk of hospitalization, long-term effects, and also death for younger people. During the COVID pandemic, so many more people died than what is normal on any given year. This should matter to you, Jimmy, unless you just say you don't care at all about people who are age 50 or older. Is that what you're saying? Because if you are, that makes you pretty terrible.
And did you know that half the country got Omicron? Do you know half of the country in the United States got Omicron last winter? Did you know that? Did the hospitals get overrun? No.
Yes, Jimmy, hospitals did get overwhelmed by Omicron. And when hospitals get overwhelmed, more people die because burdens on the healthcare system affect everybody.
It's still absolutely more dangerous to be unvaccinated than vaccinated. Andrew Neumer, a public health professor at the University of California at Irvine who studies COVID-19 mortality, told Feta and Dan, a pandemic of and by the unvaccinated is not correct.
Yes, it is, because the majority of those who are getting hospitalized and dying of COVID are still unvaccinated. If those people were all vaccinated, then we would have a lot fewer hospitalizations and a lot fewer deaths. Thus, we would be at a point where it wouldn't be noticeable that we're in a pandemic, would it? But here we are with ill-informed comedians trying to be the voice of reason.
At what point do you start getting to think for yourself too? When do you come along to being as grown up of a person as that pothead idiot Jimmy Dore?
Listen, Jimothy, I know that you're trying to think for yourself and all, and that's great. But judging from this video, I think you need a little bit of help. You can't do this on your own, buddy. So be sure to really look at the data. Be sure to really listen to scientists, and be sure to really think about things before you make these kinds of videos. In order to help you a little bit, I've provided all of the links to all of the science that I talk about in this video in the description below so that you can check it all out for yourself, and be sure to read the graphs carefully. Well, that's going to do it for this week's video. As always, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a like and maybe even check out my Patreon. And make sure to subscribe so you can catch me next week where I'll be debunking some more funky stuff. See you then.